Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, welcome to the Green Homes webinar. My name is Buchanan, and I'm going to be your host for today. So we'll do a little bit of housekeeping. Today's webinar will last for about an hour and will be recorded, so you'll be able to look back on it from YouTube next week. If you want to ask a question or leave a comment, you've got your comments box at the right-hand side of the screen. And the speakers today are Carmen from Loco Homes, myself, Sarah Buchanan from Built Environment Smarter Transformation, and my colleague Tom Warren. The reason we're here today is to share with you handy energy savings tips to reduce your bills, and also to give you some first-hand knowledge of some retrofit projects that Tom and I have both undertaken. Help you navigate the challenges of undertaking your own retrofit project. So without further ado, we're going to listen to a quick video that we have just explaining some retrofit challenges, and it'll last for about 7 minutes, and then I'll introduce Carmen. So what we'll do is we'll send out the video link. I think a few of you joined after that started, and we also have a series of videos that we can send out which will explain the retrofit principles, not challenges. I had a mind blank earlier. I'd like to introduce Carmen Lean, our first speaker from Loco Homes, and she's going to give us some energy savings tips and what you need to consider when you're thinking about that kind of whole house retrofit plan. Lots of useful resources coming your way.
Great, thank you for having me. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, Carmen, can hear you okay. We can't see you if you're planning to put your camera on, but we can hear you perfectly. Thank you.
There we are. I think that's...
Yep, can see you now. Perfect.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much for having me today. My name's Carmen, and I work as a community officer for a local home retrofit. I'm here to talk a little bit about saving energy in your home and some key considerations that for if you want to make some upgrades to your home. First off, a little bit more about Local Homes. So we're a retrofit cooperative based in Glasgow. We have about 180 members at the moment, and they are a mixture of people, a lot of homeowners, but also contractors and other professionals, and just people who are interested as well. We have it's open to anyone, but we are based in Glasgow, so we do most of our work in Glasgow, that focus is a lot on home assessments and also running kind of workshops, webinars, that sort of thing. And we also do quite a lot of research as well on the side. We're community led. We provide services and we do some innovation as well. So today there's a lot to cover. Retrofit is a big topic. I'm just gonna start kind of small and move into kind of bigger planning. So I'm going to start with kind of quick and easy things that you can do this week if you wanted. So first off, what do I mean by retrofit? When I talk about retrofit from a local home perspective, we're talking really about fitting kind of energy efficiency measures and low carbon heating systems into existing buildings. So that could be, you know, heat pump, insulation, double glazing, and that's quite important because most of the buildings, about 80% of the buildings that that will exist in 2050 are already existing. So we need to work with our existing fabric if we want to kind of decarbonize. So yeah, there's lots of benefits to retrofit, especially when it's done well. It can improve the comfort and the air quality of your home. It can lower your bills, and it's very good for the environment, and it lowers your carbon footprint as well. So there's lots of benefits to it. However, buildings are very complex, and that means that sometimes when you make changes, they can have some unintended consequences. And so it's important to be kind of aware of some of the risks involved when you're kind of starting to upgrade your home. And often it can be helpful to have a bit of a risk management hat on when you think about your home, because you can potentially, if you're bringing in new measures, you can also at the same time be mitigating some of the risks that those measures might create. So, like for example, often sometimes when people get new windows, it can bring their house to a level of air tightness that they then need to introduce controlled ventilation as well to make sure that they don't get mold or any kind of damp problems. So yeah, like one of the first principles, I guess, is repair and maintenance. There's really no point in retrofitting your home if it's in bad condition. So it's really important to be taking kind of regular care of your home, and that also depends on what kind of building it is, how it's constructed, the materials. So one of the key questions you need to ask is, or you need to know, is what kind of wall construction. Sorry, is the sound okay?
Yep, all good. Carmen, all good.
All good. Okay, sorry, just interrupt me if there's any problems. Yeah, so for example, solid wall construction requires like particular attention to breathability and to certain materials like lime mortar. So it's important to understand your building, and that is different ways to kind of learn about your building. You can research it. You can just look at it and kind of do some detective work. But also it's good to have like a professional survey. And Under One Roof, which is a really good charity in Glasgow, recommends getting a professional survey like once every 5 years. And also you can do kind of DIY surveys in between that time as well, and they have a really good resource for doing a kind of DIY survey, and kind of ticking a list that you can kind of tick off things to check, so that you kind of can see what condition your home is in, and what you can kind of make sure that you can fix things well in advance of them becoming problems. So yeah. So when we're talking about kind of quick wins, one of the easiest things you can do is draft proofing. And this is especially true in kind of old drafty buildings. That might be a case of just going around on a cold day when you've got the heating on and just feeling where the cold air is coming through. And there's certain areas of the house which are likely to, like for example, around windows. The picture that you see there, that's air tightness test. And you can see the smoke is kind of gravitating to under the window ledge, so that shows that there's a draft there. So yeah, the certain areas of your house will be more likely to have drafts. So yeah, windows, around your doors, loft hatches, skirting boards between your floorboards, fireplaces. And there's a range of things that you can do to address that. You can just use a kind of caulk and caulk gun. You can get various kind of draft seals online, like brush seals, for example, and put them around your window. For your chimney, you can use a chimney balloon or a chimney sheet as well to stop the warm air getting drawn out of your home. And yeah, a slightly bigger project would be, you know, if you're on the ground floor and you could feel lots of cold air coming up through your floorboards, you could lift your floorboards and lay down an air tightness membrane. So yeah, whenever you're improving the air tightness as well, you also need to be thinking carefully about ventilation and making sure, because if you have too much air tightness and not enough ventilation, you can have problems with moisture and also the air quality. So one thing you can do to get to kind of check your moisture levels is to get a hydrometer, and this one in the picture is only about £10, so they're not expensive. You can just get them off online, and this can help you kind of just track your home and see what the moisture levels are in different areas of the house. And that can help you kind of assess if you need more ventilation or not. And I think it was mentioned in the video before, but MVHR systems are really good kind of long-term solution to that. So yeah, improve your insulation. This is yeah, it's important to remember two things with insulation. One is that you want a continuous envelope, so without any gaps or thermal bridging. But also you want kind of adequate like thickness and U values. Really, you might want to check what insulation you've got, and you can. It's quite easy if it's in your loft. If it's in your walls, you sometimes need to get a bore scope to kind of drill a hole in and have a wee look and see what's happening there. But yeah, if you want to improve, for example, the U values of your windows, it can be, you might, but you don't want to get new windows, you might want to look into getting, for example, secondary glazing, which is a good solution as well for heritage windows. And yeah, to talk very briefly about this one as well, you can also think about turning your flow temperature down on your boiler if you have a condensing boiler. This is it's not so appropriate if you have a hot water tank, but yeah, if you have a condensing boiler, it can be helpful to turn your flow temperature down, because the boiler does work more efficiently at lower temperatures. So if you turn it down to, for example, in the picture, setting 3 or 4, that can be quite a good temperature for helping your boiler work about 10% more efficiently. So that's another way of saving money on your bills. So yeah, I'm just going to talk very briefly as well about long-term whole house planning as well, which is it's very important if you're wanting to invest a lot into your house, because it really helps you be more ambitious with your budget. It stops you from making the wrong decisions, or making the right decisions but at the wrong time as well. So whole house planning is quite important. I'll go into a little bit more as well. So yeah, what can go wrong? So often when people retrofit their homes, there's common stories and common themes that emerge in terms of things that can go wrong. So one of the big things is getting your recommendations from the installer. So it's not really independent, and there's a bit of a conflict of interest, and they might recommend something that isn't really appropriate for your house, or isn't really the best option that you have. And the picture on the left is an example of when that happens. So what you're looking at is like an attic, quite a well insulated attic already, but the guy basically was persuaded to get like spray foam insulation as well. So basically, why we would say that's not the right measure is because it's creating a kind of new insulated space in the attic, which is not a used space. So it's kind of not super effective in that regard. And although you can't see it in the picture as well, there's an area where the electrician has had to basically dig out a hole in the insulation to get to the electric. So it's kind of blocking access to the services in a way that's not really very helpful for the efficacy of the insulation. And also there are also increased risks of moisture and damp as well from the way that this has been done. So this is an example of we would say this is an example of what can go wrong, and as a consequence, he's wasted a bit of money, to be honest, and might have to have it removed as well. So it's a bit of a headache really when it goes wrong. So yeah, whole house planning is basically how you mitigate some of those risks, and it takes a much more holistic look at your whole house, and it gives you recommendations for things that you can change in a good sequence as well. So for example, if you wanted to get a heat pump, you might think to insulate your house first. However, if you insulated your house and then you found that you needed to upgrade all the pipe work for the heat pump, you might have to rip out all the insulation to access the pipe work. So whole house planning is about making sure that you can make a much more kind of ambitious long-term plan for your home, and everything can be sequenced so that you can kind of get the best out of each measure. So yeah, I think I'm pretty much done. Yeah, I'll just finish on some links. So I've got yeah, a little bit about so I've yeah, a little bit about funding as well, because I know that's something that people struggle with sometimes, or they're kind of wondering about. So Home Energy Scotland is your go-to place for funding. So if you yeah, if you are wanting to make some improvements, you know, go to Home Energy Scotland. That's a good place to start. And I've got some links as well for other kinds of maintenance, other resources that are really helpful. So yeah, got Historical Environment Scotland is really good. The Engine Shed is great for understanding historic fabrics. Under One Roof, as I say, they do a great DIY survey, which is really useful. And yeah, I've also got the Carbon Co-op webinars. They do a great, if you're kind of interested in retrofit, but you want to go a bit deeper, they do a great introduction to retrofit webinar program. And yeah, the best program as well. So yeah, thank you very much. That's me.
Thank you, Carmen. That was awesome. That was so good. I'm sure we'll get lots of questions for the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. That was really good, and it leads so nicely into my own presentation, which I'm going to do the scary thing of when you take control, and hopefully this shares really easily. We did loads of practice earlier, so hopefully you should be able to see my presentation. If someone can just let me know that you can see that okay.
Yeah, I can see it, Sarah, and it's going between
Fabulous.
slides. Brilliant.
Awesome. So the reason the best have decided to support today's webinar for the Green Homes Festival is because I sit in the retrofit team. We do retrofit skills training for contractors, for anyone who's interested in air tightness, lots of different sustainable innovations and new products and processes. We've got some amazing retrofit rigs at the factory where you can actually go into lots of different wall detailing. And we've got loads of free resources on our website. So if you want to find out more about insulation, about different types of standards in retrofit, there's lots of different guidance and standards, industry standards that you can follow, then go on our website. That's just a bit of a flavour on the slide of what's available for free. And of course, if you want to come for a tour or a visit, then please just engage with the centre. This is some energy tips that I wanted to share with you that me and my partner have introduced. We just moved house because we wanted to do a retrofit, and I lived in a tenement, and it was mixed tenure, which is obviously much more difficult to kind of make decisions about what you want to do with your house. So we decided to buy a house. And this is some of the things that we have adopted to reduce our energy bills, and it's things that are nothing to do with really retrofitting your home, but switching off appliances. I've got a little boy, so sometimes I need the boil wash, but reducing the temperature for your washing. Only boil what you need with your kettles. I reduced my boiler flow, as Carmen mentioned, and that's made a real big difference. It takes a bit longer for your house to heat up, but it means that the boiler's working more efficiently, and that's given us a reduction in our bills as well. And no more 20-minute showers for me, unfortunately. And switching your lights off. So those are just things that I had thought of that I wanted to share. You know, they're very basic. They're things that you can implement straight away, and they do make a difference. As well as light bulbs. Yeah, changing all your light bulbs to energy efficient light bulbs has made a difference for us as well. Why is retrofit becoming so important? And so partly the reason is that the Scottish Government have set the minimum energy efficiency targets in place since 2014. So it's currently an EPCB that they need to hit by 2032. It was CD for the last 10 years or so. And now the private rented sector also has minimum energy efficiency targets coming in. And guess what? The homeowner section is going to be the target. So really you want to be thinking about this because of bill reduction, obviously, but because there's going to be a change in legislation, and it basically, when you go to sell your house, it will need to have a minimum energy efficiency attached to it. So it's just to put that context, which is why there's been so much work done around skills and training, because the supply chain just isn't there yet. So you'll find that if you go to do your own retrofit. So what is an EPC? If you haven't gone to try and sell your house or bought a house recently, then it's something that you have to have, which gives you an energy efficiency rating for your house. This is mine. So currently I am an EPCC just. So technically I wouldn't have to do anything to my house. However, because I did a whole house wanted that step-by-step plan, I have discovered there's a few issues. But what your EPC gives you, it's really the first step in knowing where you are. It will provide you some recommendations and the cost attached to those. So yeah, get your EPC done. It really does give you a kind of a baseline to start from. Now, there is a lot of webinars not for that, but it's currently under consultation because it's based on cost. It doesn't take into account actual energy use. And there's a lot of debate around SAP calculations, which is the kind of modelling that gets used to work out lots of your energy use, actual energy use, and whether your house is heat pump ready, essentially what kind of kilowatt hours your house needs to heat your home and your hot water. So there is a debate around EPCs. We're just not getting into it today. But yeah, we've also done some research around the potential costs around retrofit, and this is based on a 3-bedroom sized house with a low, medium, high retrofit. It doesn't take into account putting in a heat pump, and these are just the costs that we think if you're looking at just draft proofing or insulation, and that's a median of insulation because you can do lots of different types of insulation to your house. But if you add in windows and then you're looking at solar panels, then this is the kind of costs currently you're talking about. It's going to be less if you have a flat or a smaller property. It's going to be more, and it also depends on if you're in a rural context and the amount of kind of labour availability that you've got. So these are just average costs to try and give you a bit of an idea and to spark off some questions. So myself, I house retrofit assessment because I wanted to know what my step-by-step plan would be. I thought when I moved in, I would have to replace the windows and the rough casting. Is where I thought I would start. However, what's been really great about the assessment is it's given me a bit of a different plan. What it did let me know is the first repair, as Carmen said, it's got to be repairs first. And I had a leak in my roof that I didn't know about that hadn't come up in the home survey. So that was really useful. We got that fixed straight away. I have a doll's house construction. It's a typology that's typical for the area where I live. And there's some really interesting things that I found out through doing the assessment. So we got our leak fixed. But in terms of my draft proofing, which is really the reason one of the reasons I got into the house, and it was really, really drafty. I could feel the cold. And my assessor went round with a thermal camera and has found lots of interesting, challenging details around the windows have been fitted really badly. So I have lots of gaps around my windows. So that's where I'm going to start with my air tightness taping. I also have a construction detail called dwarf walls. And there's a gap in my bathroom, which you can see there with the cold spot, and I've got a gap in my son's bedroom. So these are all areas that when I'm thinking about redoing my cavity wall insulation, these are the kind of issues that I'll need to come up with solutions for, and that's why the retrofit assessment is really good because it's let me see where the gaps are that I'll need to come up with solutions for. And summary, I don't need to start with my rough casting, which is great. But what I do need to look at is my cavity wall insulation and my loft insulation. Luckily, my radiators and my pipework is mostly heat pump ready. So in terms of that sequencing, I can just look at the fabric considerations now without having to worry about I'm going to rip anything out. And obviously, recommendations are eventually, you do the fabric first, you sort out the internals, and then you look at your solar panels for your roof. No insulation without ventilation. It's really, really important that we make sure that we don't have condensation problems. So I have a bit of an odd construction detail with my cavity wall in that it only goes halfway up my property. So why is the reason for that? There doesn't seem to be any holes at the top of the property. I've been recommended. Now, I have tried to do that. I got in touch with about 15 companies and nobody got back to me. So I've resorted to DIY. My colleague Tom, who you're going to hear from in a minute, has given me his bore scope camera. And essentially, I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to have a look at all the little dwarf walls where you saw that section that was missing. I'm going to find out what's going on with my cavity wall. One of my vents around the back has been filled over by some kind of foam. So I need to have a look at that, getting that removed. to make sure that that whole ventilation is still there. And the decision I then have is, do I take the cavity wall out and then put fresh in, or is the cavity wall I've got okay? And I forgot to mention earlier, your EPC, you need that to apply for any grant funding. So you can't apply for any grant funding through Energy Saving Scotland, Home Energy Scotland, until you've got your EPC. So my current EPC says that my cavity wall is okay, but I know it's not. So I've got a bit of a decision to make there. My roof insulation is not thick enough, so it should be 300, and it's currently sitting around 150. So we've made the decision we're going to do that ourselves. So we're going to take all of that out and replace it. We're just having discussions at the moment about what kind of insulation we want to use, and of course we're going to be making sure that that roof space is really fully ventilated. And I don't know why those books are there, but that was the previous owner, so I'm going to have to get rid of these books that are stored up there. Yeah, and I just wanted to show this because it's a really interesting detail. I have got a very unusual system in my gable end, on my gable wall, and the assessor actually had to go out to Twitter because he said he'd never seen it before. So that was really useful, because what it's given me then is context that if I do eventually get the rough casting done, then I can let them know, listen, I've got this kind of unusual system of plaster and lath at the gable wall, so can you be careful when you're doing that rough casting, because that would be the kind of long-term plan. Yeah, and again, it's similar resources to Carmen. The biggest challenge for me has probably been in terms of contractors and supply chain. It's trying to get access to the right contractors, and so there's a lot of work getting done by Scottish Government into kind of a way for us to be able to pool resources for homeowners to really make sure that you're getting accredited contractors that know how to do proper step-by-step retrofit. And this is just to put in for any of you that have got traditional buildings. There's some really good guidance on the HES website. So we'll send all these presentations out, and you'll be able to access it next week on YouTube. So yeah, if you've got any questions, we'll be happy to answer at the end. And yeah, that's my presentation. And I'm just going to hand over to my colleague Tom. He's a bit of an expert at retrofit, whereas I'm just beginner level. So I'll just pass over.
Thank you, Sarah. I certainly wouldn't describe myself as an expert. Learned the hard way through some of the photos and what I'm going to show you is what I've done with my own house. Let's move on the slide. So I was in a similar position to Sarah, living in a tenement flat, and all the challenges around shared ownership and the challenges of retrofit in that situation. So we were looking as a family at alternative places to live, and we're fortunate to be able to select a property that turned out to be relatively easy and importantly affordable to do a DIY retrofit. This was purchased in 2011, and it's fair to say it's still work in progress, so it's not necessarily the quickest route. It was a 4-bedroom, 100 square meter house, so kind of a good example, I guess, of a kind of typical detached sort of bungalow. Layout changes were planned right from the outset. I was fortunate to be able to do some of that thinking and work myself. So the drawings shown here are my own. There wasn't a formal retrofit assessment done, but as I guess an informed owner, I sort of took a whole house approach, thinking about layouts and other alterations we wanted to do. Understanding the existing construction, which is somewhat unusual, which we'll see in a minute, was key. It was quite a slow, or is still quite a slow process because of the, I guess, level of research and trying to find sustainable products. So actually looking at maybe embodied carbon, circular economy principles to the works that we're doing, as well as improving the fabric. So the house I'm in, it was built in the early 1950s. Rather unusually, it was built in Finland and imported to Scotland as a panelised system. There are a number of these around Scotland. These ones were built for the North Scotland Hydroelectric Board for electricians. There's similar ones from Sweden for Forestry Commission and other industries. Importantly, it's essentially 100% timber construction above the ground. It's got a panelised, rather unusual panelised tongue and groove wall construction. It did have 12 millimeters, so very thin dense wood fibre insulation boards to all of the external walls and ceilings. So it did have some insulation, which I guess for the time was relatively innovative. No plasterboard in the property, which has meant a relatively dust-free kind of works, and then minimal insulation in the loft. Some of the unusual things were there is, where we've left it in place, 2 layers of a very thick building paper to all of the walls, both internal panels and the external walls, and a tar paper below the floor. So these, whilst not an airtight membrane, do provide an additional layer of kind of control to air movement because of the way they've been installed in kind of large format papers. It had been double glazed prior to us buying the property, although the doors in particular were particularly drafty, which we'll come on to in a bit. Where we've made changes, we've tried to kind of honour the timber construction by using OSB and plywood as kind of actual visible construction kind of materials. So yeah, it's quite personal in terms of how this one's been done. We did have funding, which made a big difference to internal wall insulation. So on the plan there, the kind of orange line shows that insulation layer. So that was an insulated plasterboard installed on top of the existing wood fibre insulation. It's slightly reduced room layouts, but overall definitely one of the most significant changes. We removed all pipes, kitchen, bathroom services, and some of the internal walls so that there was no cold bridging, so it could really wrap right way around. Now, this was pretty disruptive, but critical to getting good insulation. Whilst doing that, it also exposed areas where timber maybe needed repair, or just to find out more about the building. So yeah, quite disruptive. But this was work that was funded and done by an external company, so that kind of made it a good option. At the same time, there was mineral wool insulation put under the floor where they could access in the crawl space, and the loft was topped up with 300mm mineral wool as well. There was no heating system when we bought the house, which strangely actually was one of the attractions for me, because it meant we could start afresh. There wasn't a kind of old oil or gas system. There's no mains gas where I live. There was an electric immersion heater for hot water, but contemporary with the house, so not very thermally efficient. One of the early things that we spent money on, and I should say this has been a drawn-out process because it's been when I can afford to do the works, but we installed some PV on the roof, so 4.5 kilowatt of PV, so the maximum you can kind of really put on a domestic property, and that with a new immersion tank means that there's like today when it's sunny, there's actually too much hot water, so that's been a really positive investment. There's a solid fuel wood stove with a back boiler put in, which isn't necessarily the most sustainable option, but was a kind of quick option for getting heat into the property, which, as I said, didn't have any heating. I think the hot water tank we put in is undersized for both the back boiler and the amount of heat we get from the solar panels, but we're limited by the space where a water tank could go. So that's definitely a learning. Jumped on one. The other items there were just when we were getting the PV installed and the internal inverter and cabling, wanted to make sure that didn't get in the way of future roof windows and a loft conversion. So thinking ahead about the implications of where technologies are going. We've got a couple of direct electric infrared panels. That's what the photo is there. Again, nothing particularly sustainable about them because they're just direct heating, but good for instantaneous heat. A non-fabric one, but we're on a 100% green tariff, which is an important consideration in terms of where you're getting the electricity from. And I have thought about future SLC pumps, so we've allowed space for future ducting and pipe work for that, if I can afford that, or if there's funding in due course. One of the bits of research I did was looking at natural fibre insulations, and in Scotland we have Sizeltech, who produce Sizel wool. So I ordered 4 pallets of this 100mm insulation for the kind of room in the loft insulation. So we already had 300mm in the ceiling. So this is to insulate out the roof pitch. I think this is maybe the first time it's been used in this way rather than a wall. So a bit of a slightly innovative way of holding up with the AirTech insulation, which also acted as a vapor control layer. So that's all taped and all the staples taped over and things like that. In due course, there'll be timber battens and timber cladding below that, just to kind of finish it off and hold it all in place. Importantly, there's a 50mm airspace between which is the white membrane there, between that and the underside of the sarking board with a ventilated space there. So yeah, trying to be conscious of ventilation when insulating. I said it had UPVC windows when we bought it, so we've only selectively replaced windows where they're either been sort of defective because of age, or in this case where we're looking at layout change. So where we've been able to afford and wanted to put in new windows and doors, we've gone for alu-clad triple glazed timber doors from a range of different suppliers. The air tightness of these is fantastic compared to the UPVC. So really pleased with these. The photos probably be a bit blurry, but you'll see there the kind of innovative panel of the wall where it's been opened up, and the kind of tongue and groove boards. And then finally, try to maximise daylight and indirect solar gains. So conscious of overheating, so things like sun pipes are quite good for that, and full glazed doors, but where there's a kind of porch, a bit of an internal buffer, so you can kind of open one door or the other to control the ventilation and the heat. Quite active controls around moisture, so trying to dry washing outside, trying to make sure that windows and doors are open when we can, extract for showers and things like that. Just trying to, in the timber construction, just trying to manage moisture in the building. We don't have any whole house ventilation, which would have been, I guess, another route. It's been a really steep learning curve around trying to look at products, trying to look at comparative suppliers, and trying to make those informed decisions. And it's a DIY project, so been a bit slow, not necessarily the most efficient way of doing it, but certainly learned a lot from it. Okay, thank you. And hand you back to Sarah.
Thanks, that was awesome. Thanks, Tom. Loads of interesting detail there, which kind of fits in your section. Now my screen is freezing, so if it freezes and I don't come back, Tom, you might have to jump in. Okay, so I'll just start with our first question, and it comes from Graham, so thanks. Do reference archetypes of insulation exist for different building typologies? For example, a converted exposed dormers versus a terraced masonry flat, and this for details like vapor barriers and working around light fittings. So from my knowledge, there are a number of different standards that you can work to, which are industry standards. However, it's best practice and guidance. There's a lot of chat about archetypes and working out archetype details for a particular archetype. But as houses are all different, people might have made changes to them, almost, you do have an archetype, but you also need to survey the house itself to make sure that what the architect says it should look like, it does actually look like. So yeah, there's lots of different conversations about archetypes. Scottish Government, as part of the heat and building strategy, have got some research that they're doing into that. And as far as for vapor barriers and things like that, detailing around that, I think that comes from the manufacturer, but I'm gonna defer to Tom here if you know more than me.
I think you've kind of covered that pretty well there, Sarah. I don't think there's really anything to add to that.
Manufacturers, the detailing is for installation, or archetypes wise, lots of social housing are looking at their various archetypes, and there's a lot of chat about Scottish Government that would be a good way to do it, like almost like a retrofit pattern book. That's the phrase that keeps getting mentioned, but at the moment it's all early stage, Graham. But yeah, Carmen, do you have any idea about vapour barrier standards?
Oh, not really. I would say like to talk a little bit about the different building typologies. So like one of the things that Local Home is kind of trying to do is to like basically, because we work in Glasgow, there are kind of a lot of neighbourhoods which have like the similar houses, or it's the same kind of typology, rows and rows. So like what we have started very like early days, but is to take one of the houses and like do a really deep like survey and really understand it and use that to help the rest of the people in the neighbourhood. So that's kind of how we kind of address that as a cooperative, but it feels like early days, like you say, like a pattern book would be fantastic. But it's
Nidri Road is a good example for Yeah, apologies, my screen keeps freezing, so I might be cutting people off, apologies. There's a really good example, Graham, Nidri Road's retrofit of it's an Retrofit standard, 6 tenements. So have a look at Nidri Road, and we'll send the link actually to Nidri Road at the end. So just another question then, Tom, what's been the biggest challenge so far for you for your retrofit?
Yeah, I think it's been sort of trying to do it myself, both physically doing the work, but actually the slow bit is actually making decisions. So because I'm paying for it as well, it's trying to make sure that we're using the any spare money that we have to invest in energy efficiency or insulation, just making sure that's the right choice. And maybe quite cautious in terms of making decisions, but it's been contacting suppliers, looking at products, trying to find so you can go to a builder's merchant and buy insulation and all the rest, but coming across things like Sisal Tech, just in terms of my own kind of values and if I'm spending money on insulation, I don't want it to have other kind of negative environmental impact. So yeah, trying to find natural products. And because the property is timber, it's trying to do things that are sympathetic to the existing construction. But that's come through essentially taking the house apart and trying to understand it and the challenge of living in a house with a young family at the same time can't be underestimated. So it's certainly not a route I'd recommend for all, but is in terms of a learning exercise. And what I'd hope is obviously other timber houses which we have in Scotland of this era could maybe learn from some of the retrofit insights that I've gained.
Yeah. Yeah. And for you, is there a kind of general kind of common challenge that comes from the kind of homes that Local Homes deal with?
I'm just trying to think. I mean, at the moment, I think a lot of the challenges are around, like, part of it is the kind of technology, but a lot of the retrofit technology exists. It seems to be the kind of like things like finding the right installers and contractors, funding. It's like all the other stuff that people really struggle with and really stalls people. And I mean that's just something that there's no real like quick fixes, to be honest. It feels like we just need a big change of direction away from kind of demolish and replace models and towards kind of much deeper retrofit. But I mean that's why BEST exists, and it's why we exist, because we're trying to get that in motion. So
I mean, just to add to that, I mean, one of the reasons that I've taken a DIY approach is actually because the lack of contractors, who will deal with things, sort of small pieces of work. If I bundled it up into a big contract, then it might be attractive to a medium-sized contractor, but that's then not affordable for me as an owner. So breaking it down into kind of manageable tasks, but with this vision from the start of how we want the house layout to be, but also the kind of the principles around how we're heating and ventilating and insulating it. So yeah, having someone help you set up that vision from the start, and then you can pick it off in bite-sized pieces, I think, is our route, and probably an affordable route, or more affordable than a kind of hit it at once approach, which requires quite a large amount of capital in one go. I mean, on your scale of retrofit investment, the work I've done over the last 12 years, even doing it DIY, is definitely at the upper end of that upper level. PV, insulation, materials, just the cost of timber. It's not a cheap option, but I decided to make that investment because this is a kind of long-term house for us as a family. So making sure it was affordable to heat is obviously key, and a comfortable place to live. That's paid off because actually it doesn't need heating for most of the year. It's only really in the winter, and when it's really cold, that we're then putting either the solid fuel stove on or the infrared panels, but using them sparingly because there's a cost to fuel and a cost to electricity. So yeah, overall it's worked in that sense.
Okay, and the biggest challenge for me, I think, has probably been trying to access the grant system, which has taken me 6 months and loads of emails back and forth. So good luck to everybody that's beginning that journey. Again, if you want further insights or handy tips, get your EPC first is definitely your first step. And also please do access all the resources that we've got on.
I think you've frozen a bit, Sarah, but I'll just maybe add, when we're talking about archetypes, or if you live somewhere where there's other houses on your street.
What I'll do now is just this website. Well, wrap up and find links and session start. I don't know if people can hear me or not. But yeah, I'm just doing the polls and saying, so we'll post all the links in the box afterwards. Thank you.
Right.